Hello, friends. Mr. Baines here with today's knowledge lesson. Now, um, Tuesday's lesson was very exciting as we started to learn about the early North American settlers that came over from Great Britain. Now, today's lesson, we're going to learn about some more important events that led to the creation of our country or nation, the United States. We're going to learn about some of the problems that the colonial settlers encountered, and we're going to find out what the colonists did that was so drastic and dramatic when they held something called the Boston Tea Party. Let's listen. For a long time, many colonists were proud to be British citizens, ruled by the great King of Britain. But then things began to change. The King and the British Parliament had spent a lot of money helping to set up and protect the colonies to help pay for these expenses. Parliament decided to make the colonies in America pay taxes to Great Britain. Taxes are extra money people pay when they buy certain things. For example, today we pay taxes when we buy clothes at a department store, food in a restaurant, or gasoline for our cars. Depending on the state where you live, you might have to pay $1 or $2 more for your new shirt than what's listed on the price tag, or a few extra cents for your sandwich than the price listed on the menu. But these stores do not keep this extra money. They must give the extra money, or taxes as it's called, to the government. These days, we vote and elect representatives or people to represent us in the government. These people make decisions about how to best spend taxes to provide public services that benefit all who live there. The government uses these taxes to help pay for things that everyone needs, like schools, public transportation, roads, water and garbage services, police officers, and fire protection, as well as many, many other public services. But back in the time when the colonies were first established, the people who lived in the colonies were not permitted to vote and elect representatives or people to represent them in the British Parliament on the other side of the ocean. So many people lived in the American colonies in the 1700s felt that it was unfair for the British king to ask them to pay taxes. The colonists were asked to pay extra for stamps, sugar, and other things that they needed. Because the colonists could not voice their opinions to the British government through the representatives, they wondered, should they even have to pay taxes? It just did not seem fair to them. All over the colonies, people grew more and more angry, but it was in the colony of Massachusetts that tempers flared the most. King George of Great Britain sent troops to try to keep the peace in Boston, but it did not help very much. Then, in 1773, the British Parliament did something that the colonists just could not stand for. They passed a law called the Tea Act and tried to force the colonists to buy tea from one British company and one British company only, charging a very large tax for the tea. The colonists did not think it was fair to force them to pay more for tea, and they refused to pay taxes on the tea, which was one of their favorite drinks. They began sending boatloads of tea back to Britain and ordering tea from the Dutch Republic instead. This made the king even angrier, and he told them that they could not send any more tea back to Great Britain without paying the tax. Because of this, the colonists of Massachusetts revolted or rose up or refused to follow the rules of the King of Britain. They decided that they would not accept the king's decision. Boatloads of British tea continued to enter the port of Boston. On a December night in 1773, a group of men known as the Sons of Liberty planned a most unusual tea party. Smearing their faces with soot, grease, and streaks of red paint, they stuck feathers in their hair, disguised as Mohawk Native Americans, a common symbol of freedom at the time. They made their way down to the harbor. Climbing aboard the 3 British boats, they dumped 342 trunks of valuable tea into the Boston harbor. This meant that the British lost the tea and the money. This event became known as the Boston Tea Party. Furious, King George of Great Britain closed the port of Boston, one of the American colony's most important ports. He told them that they would not receive any more goods from Britain until they paid for the tea that they had destroyed. With no supplies coming from Great Britain, there was nothing for the colonists to sell in their shops, so people had to close their shops. Many people lost their jobs. Food was scarce. Colonists from up and down the East Coast helped out, sending money and supplies to Massachusetts. What were the colonists to do? What should they say to the British king? The people of Boston began to talk of war against Great Britain and its king. But other colonists warned them to not act so quickly. Just wait a bit, they suggested. It's never a good idea to fight back without cooling off a bit first. All 13 colonies decided to come up with a plan together. They held a big meeting in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, which was about midway between the furthest New England colonies and the furthest southern colonies. Each colony elected representatives to attend the meeting. It was the first time that representatives from all of the colonies except for Georgia met together in one place. They called themselves the Continental Congress. Leaders in the colonies were divided. Some remained loyal or faithful to Great Britain and their king. They were called loyalists. After all, they said, we are British too. Others were beginning to think of themselves not as British citizens, but as Americans. They wanted to rule themselves instead of being ruled by a faraway king. These people were called patriots. Members of the Continental Congress included George Washington from Virginia, a young army commander who had helped protect the colonies. Benjamin Franklin attended the second meeting of the Continental Congress. He was a Philadelphian known for his ability to get people to work together. Although he was unable to attend, Thomas Jefferson was also selected. He was known as an excellent writer and was from Virginia. At the First Continental Congress, the representatives decided to approach the king in a friendly way. They sent him a letter telling him that they wanted to work things out peacefully. They asked the British Parliament to stop making laws or rules for them. We feel that we should create our own laws since we are not able to vote for laws in Parliament, they said. In the meantime, while they waited for an answer from the king, the colonists decided to stop selling goods to Great Britain and to stop buying goods from Great Britain. At the end of the meeting, the colonists were still split on their opinions about what to do. The loyalists hoped that the king would grant their request, letting them make their own laws while still remaining British. The patriots, however, kept things stirred up, talking of going to war and breaking away from Britain altogether. It certainly was not a very calm or peaceful time.